Hi everyone, welcome back to English Explained with Mr OAU. Just like all my other videos, I am going to be aiming for one take because, well, I'm too lazy to edit these videos myself, and I don't really have enough money to hire an editor. So one take. So please forgive me if I do ramble on, if I trip over my own words. Just bear with me, please. I mean, on the bright side, because there are no edits, you get the real me, the unfiltered, and the unedited me. So that's the silver line. Yes, anyways, for today's video, it's going to be our first video in a series of videos where we will be looking at visual texts or analyzing visual texts in more details. And the way that I have decided to structure these videos is every single video I am going to explore in depth one visual technique. Yeah, so this is going to be a technique that we can actually use in our responses whenever we are required to analyze a visual text. So, next slide. So yes, this is the image or the visual text or the painting or whatever you want to call it in the thumbnail. This is one of my favorite paintings of all time. I actually discovered it quite recently, but it just really resonated with me when I saw this. And I did want to share this with all of you. So if you guys know what this painting is, please leave a comment in the comment section below. No prizes because, well, I'm poor. So you get bragging rights. Okay, so in terms of today's video, the visual technique that we'll be focusing on will be visual metaphors. Yeah. So if you haven't realized already, yes, it's on the screen, it's on the first slide. That's going to be our first technique that we look at. And the reason for that is because visual metaphors is probably one of the most common techniques that you will find in visual texts. So yeah, that's why we are going to look at this first. Okay, so in terms of the lesson structure, I'm going to roughly break it into 4 parts. So the first part, I'm going to define what a visual metaphor actually is. I'm sure most of you already know what a metaphor is, so we're going to find out if a visual metaphor is different, similar to a normal metaphor or not. Yeah, and then we're going to look at some more examples just to consolidate our understanding of what visual metaphors are. And then I'm going to give you all some useful tips that you can keep in mind as you're analyzing visual metaphors for visual texts. And then we're going to write a response together. Okay. So just pause the video now and have a read of the definition. I often find that if you're reading the definition as I'm reiterating it to you, it tends to not sink in as much because you'll be trying to multitask, focusing on my own voice and focusing on your own inner voice as you're reading the definition. So pause the video, read the definition, and come back. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you have paused the video and read the definition. So let's go through it together now. So when it comes to a visual metaphor, it is when a thing such as a concept, a person, or a place is visually represented by and therefore compared to an element within a visual text. So if all that sounds quite confusing, hopefully the examples that I've included will clarify things. So for example, an artist may use a visual metaphor to represent marriage, which is the concept, by representing it as a roller coaster. So essentially what's happening is the artist is comparing the concept of marriage to a roller coaster. Okay, so keep that in mind. So for what purpose? Why would the artist do that? So visual metaphors highlight and reinforce the similarities, right, between the visual element and the thing that the visual element is meant to represent. Okay, so in this case, following on from our marriage example, if we choose to compare marriage to a roller coaster, we're choosing to highlight the similarities between the two, right? So in this case, similar to going on a roller coaster, marriage can be something that's quite exciting and unpredictable. Yeah, and for some people, marriage may also bring, never mind. If I was going to make an inappropriate joke, I'm going to move on. Okay, anyways, so if those examples weren't enough, we're going to have a look at some more examples. So, example one, I got this lovely poster from Save the Planet World Wildlife Fund. So donate to them if you love animals. But anyways, so in this case, you can see that a visual metaphor is used to compare the Earth to a melting ice cream cone. Yeah, so that's the visual metaphor, right? Earth is being represented or being compared to a melting ice cream cone. So think about it. What is the meaning created by this? Right? What's the meaning? You have a think. You don't have to answer me straight away. Okay, so yeah, so from the poster, like an ice cream cone, the Earth is melting. So it's definitely a comment about climate change and how the Earth is in a state of decay, similar to how an ice cream might decay or melt when it's under the sun. Yeah, so it's meant to be a comment about climate change and how we need to be a bit more careful with how we are contributing to the climate crisis. Okay, so I have another example here. It's a drawing from an artist which I quite like. So John Hallcraft, he draws some really good satirical cartoons. So yeah, I do recommend you to check him out as well. But anyways, going back to the visual metaphor, you can see that the visual metaphor here is quite apparent. The iPad, which is representative of technology, is compared to an octopus. Yeah, so have a think about what that means. What's the effect of this? You don't have to answer me straight away. Okay, so I would say the visual metaphor, or the purpose of this visual metaphor here, is to convey how technology can also entrap individuals, just like the tentacles of an octopus. It's meant to speak to how technology is quite addicting, and once you do get trapped in this technological world, it's hard for you to escape. Similar to how it's hard for you to escape an octopus if it has its tentacles wrapped around you. Yeah, so you can see now, hopefully you can see now that the pattern here is that a visual metaphor is meant to compare two things in order to highlight the similarities between the two things. Yeah. Okay. So now I'm going to go through some useful tips. Yeah. So these tips are meant to help you analyze visual metaphors when you are writing your paragraphs, your essays, or whatever. So in this case, I've got two helpful tips. So tip number one, you should always specify in your response the two things that are being compared by the visual metaphor. Yeah, so this is one of those things that I realize that students often forget to do. They just say, the visual image uses a visual metaphor to do this. But they don't specify what the visual metaphor is. They don't tell me what are the two things being compared. And if you don't do that, I'm not going to give you the mark. Yeah, that's the bottom line. It's not hard to compare the two. It's not hard to mention the two things that are being compared. So just do it. Yeah. So in this case, you want to write something like, a visual metaphor is used to compare marriage to a roller coaster, to suggest that marriage is equally as exciting and unpredictable. Yeah. Just specify. Just tell me what are the two things being compared. Yeah. Please don't forget that. Yeah. And tip 2 is to aid you in telling me what are the two things being compared. So using words such as compared to, likened to, equated to, paralleled to, correlated to. These are all phrases that you can inject into your responses when you are analyzing visual metaphors. Okay. If I am going too fast, feel free to pause the video and so that you can read the information on the slides at your own pace. But please make sure to return back to the video after you finish. Yeah. Okay, So now we're coming towards the end of our lesson, or video I should say, and this is when we're going to actually analyze a visual metaphor for a visual text response, for a short answer question response. Okay, so this is the image that we're going to be focusing on today, and the question is, what does text E suggest about technology? Okay, so just have a look, have a think about it, and then we'll go through the answer together very, very soon. Yeah, so please pause the video if you want to write a response yourself. If not, yeah, I can just walk you through it myself. Okay, so probably the most noticeable feature in this visual image is that the iPhone has been made into a gel. Or I should say a gel is shaped like an iPhone. Yeah, so essentially what the visual metaphor here is, surprise, surprise, yeah, is that technology or phones are compared to jails, right? So what do you think that's trying to suggest about technology, right? Okay, so it'll be very similar to one of the first examples that we looked at. Yeah, if you're comparing the phone / technology to a jail, then you are trying to imply that technology does have this overwhelming power of being able to make people become addicted and obsessed, so that they are almost trapped. They get trapped into their technological worlds, so much so it's like they're in jail. Yeah, they lose their freedom. They aren't able to fulfill their responsibilities, and they're just trapped by their technological devices. Yeah, so let's put this together, or let's put this into a response. Yeah, so I'm going to do one of those cooking show things. This is a response which I've prepared earlier. So I will give you a moment to read this yourself. And then, so pause the video, yeah, read it yourself, and then come back to it. And then we will read it together. Okay, so I'm going to assume that you have returned to the video and that you've read the response already. Before we read the response, I just want to make it clear that I'm a strong supporter of petal. That is the structure that I follow, and it's the structure that I suggest you to follow as well. In my opinion, it's by far the best out of peel, star, steel, whatever. Yeah, petal is the best. Okay, so what does text E suggest about technology? Okay, so you start off with a point. Text E suggests that technology is hyper addictive. And then a visual metaphor is used to liken phones to a prison. Right, so in that one sentence there, I've ticked off the T and the E. This is to suggest, so this is the analysis now. This is to suggest that phones, and by extension, technology, possesses the power to entrap users within the technological worlds created by their electronic devices. Yeah, similar to how a criminal would be trapped in their jail cell. Okay, so that's the analysis. Yeah, you can see how the analysis is closely linked to the visual metaphor, and you can see how when I do mention the visual metaphor, I also clearly state what the two things are that are being compared, which in this case is phones and a prison. Okay, and then just to finish it off, users struggle to break free as the allure of social media, online shopping, etc. is overpoweringly addictive. Okay. So, just to kind of recap, when it comes to visual metaphors, it's important that you understand in your head what the two things are being compared. Yeah? And then, step 2, think about what are the similarities that the artist is trying to highlight by comparing the two things together. Okay? But yeah, that's all I have for you all today. Thank you for sticking around. Just to reiterate, all my videos are in one take, so I do apologize for any stuttering or rambling on. Thank you for sticking with me.